Before we begin today's episode, we want to provide a brief content warning. This episode includes discussions that mention suicide. If you or someone you know is struggling, please reach out to a trusted person or contact a mental health professional. Listener discretion is advised. Hello, ghosties. You're listening to Not My Ghost.
Not my problem. I'm Kelly.
And I'm Jen.
Whether you're a skeptic, a true believer, or somewhere in between, join us for a journey into the unknown.
Because remember, when it comes to the paranormal, it may not be our problem.
But it's certainly someone's problem.
Hey, Kelly, how are you today?
Good. How are you?
I am doing well. I have the day off of work, so no complaints there.
Well, you kind of have a day off of work. I mean, this is work,
Well, that's true. This is kind of work.
but this is work that we love.
Right.
I was thinking this morning that before we recorded the first podcast, I was a little nervous about it. Like, I didn't know how hard it was going to be. Just thinking about all of the steps leading to the first podcast and trying to get everything, all the stories together and all the communication back and forth between us. Like, how are we going to structure this? And this, do you like this music? And do you like this? I was like, oh, crap. This just seems like so much. But then when we sat down and recorded, then we sat down and recorded again.
Oh, yes.
I thought, wow, the recording part and that makes all of the rest of it so much worth it. I enjoyed it so much.
No, I agree. It definitely was a lot to start in the back and forth. And then when we recorded the first episode and lost the entire thing and had to do it again.
You know, it was going to happen eventually.
Yeah, I listen to a lot of podcasts and I have heard all of them say at least once, if not multiple times, that they're recording this episode for the second time because tech issues. So I knew it was going to happen. I just didn't think it would happen on our first episode.
So one of my favorite podcasts, I don't know if I should say the name or not.
Yeah, no, call it out.
They don't make them anymore. It's called Mormon and the Meth Head.
Oh, yeah, I remember you told me that.
Right. And I remember several times listening to that podcast where they were like, so this is the, third time we've recorded this or something because something happened.
Yeah, tech issues are a real thing. So we will struggle with that as we continue. But we got the first episode done. It's being edited now by myself, and now we're on the second episode. So we are officially in the unscripted banter section. And this is really going to be unscripted banter because I was so focused on my episode that I didn't put too many bullet points.
Well, that's okay because it's supposed to be unscripted.
That's true. That's true. My only bullet point for today is my move to Florida because it kind of themes with our episode. So I don't know if I ever actually said that I was in Florida. I know I said I moved out of Maryland. It's been about a year now, officially a Floridian. And yeah, I love it here.
I hate it that you're there.
I'm sorry. You are coming to visit me though soon.
I am coming to visit you very soon.
Yes, very soon, like a couple of weeks.
Yes.
I'm very excited for that.
Same.
Yes, so that'll be a lot of fun. Like I said, I moved here about a year ago. I am in the St. Augustine area, which, it's really wonderful here. I have gotten my Florida legs when it comes to being a wimp about the cold. You know me, I've always hated the cold, but I at least thought that I would get through one winter here where I would really just appreciate that even in the 40s, it wasn't in like the teens. And I didn't. If it dropped below 50, I was like, nope, I'm out. I'm done. It's miserable. I'm cold. It's awful.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, I remember because I work remote. So I remember being on work calls with people in other areas. And I would be like, oh, it's so cold here. And they'd be like, how cold is it? I'm like, it's a high of 48 today. And then everyone would roll their eyes at me because they're like, it's 17 degrees here. I'm like, sorry.
Yeah.
Your life choices don't affect my life choices.
My oldest daughter's boyfriend is from North Pole, Alaska. And I remember we were talking about because they have periods like a couple months where there's no sun at all. It's just complete darkness. And then
Yeah, I
they
couldn't
have in
do
the
that.
summer, they have sun for 24 hours a day for a while. But when we were talking, I was like, I cannot imagine being that cold and dark all the time. I don't think I could handle it.
No.
Now, Rebecca loves the cold. So she was like, oh, I would love it. Well,
Rebecca is Kelly's daughter, by the way.
oh, sorry. Yes. She was like, I would love it. And you could like hang out outside and party. And her boyfriend looked at her and said, you don't hang out outside and party when it's 20 below.
No,
No,
no.
no.
She's thinking like Maryland cold, not Alaska cold.
Right.
I mean, I've always hated the cold. It was always a goal of mine to move south, and I am so glad that I'm here. So summers are hot. I will give it that, but generally I just spend the summers when I have days off, I just go to the pool and I just if it's too hot,
Right.
I just sit in the water the entire time and it's wonderful.
I need seasons.
That's fair.
I need my fall in particular. If I lived somewhere where I didn't have a nice fall with the color changing of the leaves and
In Maryland, you do get the color changings. I'll give it that. But I would not call Maryland a nice fall because Maryland is bipolar when it comes to the weather. And I'm sure other places are like this too, but I only know Maryland. But it's bipolar when it comes to the weather. You will have it be 90 degrees one day, and the next day it'll snow. And then the day after that, it'll be like your nice, cool 60, 70-degree fall day. And then it'll go back to the 90s. So
I think 98 degrees one day and snow the next is a bit of an exaggeration.
a little bit of an exaggeration, but not
tiny bit.
but not a ton because Maryland is known for having all 4 seasons in a 2-week time period.
I will say that it's getting hotter and hotter in the fall, where it's when you think of like when people talk about the fall, they think, oh, sweater weather and like the coziness and it's getting less and less like that here because it's getting
Yeah.
hotter and hotter here. So I would be open to moving somewhere where it is a milder, nicer fall with cooler weather and really be able to enjoy all of that. But I could not be somewhere where there was no fall.
So we get fall, we just get it in December.
Do you have color changing leaves?
No, not really. We do miss that.
Yeah. See, and that's Halloween stuff. You can't have that in December. That's Christmas.
Well, yeah, but I still go full on spooky season.
In
Just
December?
no, I mean, but during spooky season,
Oh, during
just
spooky season.
the
Well,
leaves
yeah.
are still green.
I mean, it is going to be July, which means it's going to be August soon. So last week of August, I'm pulling all of my fall and Halloween stuff out because I'm going to enjoy that for as long as possible.
Absolutely. After Labor Day, that's always my rule when I can start really going into the fall.
Right. And I found, so it used to be I would do fall and then Halloween and then Thanksgiving and then Christmas, but I ain't got time for this anymore. So I just
No.
do Halloween and then first week in November, Christmas tree's going up. We're doing Christmas now. We're all
Oh,
in.
no,
We're going to have
nope.
Christmas. I can't do it. I can't have that period where if I put all of the Halloween stuff away, I have to pull everything out of this one tiny closet under the stairs.
But why put the Halloween stuff away? Halloween and Thanksgiving are similar color schemes. So, like, to me, I would rather extend Halloween through Thanksgiving with the color schemes.
Because all of my decorations are ghosts and bats and skeletons and monsters, and that's not very fall Thanksgiving. I can't
It
speak
can
for
be
them.
if you want it to be. It can be whatever your heart desires.
Well, then it can be Christmas on November 1st, if it can be whatever
I
my
mean,
heart desires.
well, does your heart desire that? Because mine doesn't.
I love the Christmas tree. I love the lights on the tree. I love having all the other lights off in the living room and just the Christmas tree lit up. Yeah.
Okay.
I used to
See,
hate
for me,
Christmas, but there was
for me,
some.
last
Oh, go ahead.
last year was weird for me because I moved into my apartment on December 1st. So I was in this weird stage where like I wanted to decorate my apartment that I was moving into, but I also needed to decorate for Christmas. So after I decorated for Christmas, but after Christmas, I was like, ready to just rip it all down and just have my apartment. Because it was the first, it was my first apartment, my first time ever living by
Right.
myself,
It's a big
not with my
deal.
parents or a significant other. And I wanted to decorate. And it was hard to do with Christmas stuff. So this year might be a little easier.
Okay. Well, I think that should end our unscripted banter because we have a lengthy
We do. We
episode.
do. Today, we are going to be discussing a hotspot for both history buffs and ghostly tales. From shipwrecks and wars to spine chilling ghost stories, there is no shortage of history and hauntings at this iconic Florida landmark. We are going to explore the fascinating and historical past of the
Augustine.
St. Augustine Lighthouse.
That might be a different one than the one you did.
Might be. That's going to be our next merch. Lighthouse with a pig on it.
Augustine, I love it.
The St. Augustine Lighthouse. So we're going to start with some fun facts. So the St. Augustine Lighthouse is a part of the oldest permanent aid to navigation in North America, and it dates back to the Spanish watchtowers in the 16th century. Also, from atop the lighthouse, visitors can see the historic city of St. Augustine, including landmarks such as Castillo de San Marcos and the Bridge of Lions. So if you've ever been to St. Augustine, you know that's the big fort that's downtown and then the bridge that's downtown. Kelly, when you come in a couple of weeks, I will show you both of those.
Yay.
The fort is also super haunted, so that might be another episode one day, but it's absolutely beautiful. It's right on the water. And then some scary facts about the lighthouse. The first one is less ghostly, but scary for me because I'm afraid of heights. But I have been to the top of the St. Augustine Lighthouse. I just had to stand with my back literally to the wall as I walked around it because I can't get too close to the edge. But the St. Augustine Lighthouse stands 165 feet tall and has 219 steps leading to the top. And you feel every single step.
Yeah, I can do it.
You are walking, especially in the summer, which is when I walked to the top of the lighthouse because it was hot. Another scary fact is the waters around St. Augustine are very treacherous and have caused a lot of shipwrecks over the centuries. Some of these wrecks even date back to the 1700s. And then more paranormal fact, St. Augustine Lighthouse has been featured on several paranormal TV shows, including Ghost Hunters, Ghost Adventures, My Ghost Story, Most Terrifying Places in America, and BuzzFeed Unsolved. So lots of real ghost hunter people have came out to investigate this lighthouse.
When I was at Paracon at Penhurst Asylum last month, I got to meet the ghost hunters.
Which I'm still so
And
jealous of.
they did also the crew from Project Fear, which is my absolute favorite paranormal show. You can find that on YouTube, by the way. Everybody should go watch it. So the ghost hunters did a Q&A and they had asked them like what investigation like really stands out to you that had you really like, oh my gosh, like look at what is going on here. This is kind of nuts. And I believe it was Steve said the St. Augustine Lighthouse was one of those for him.
Yeah, that's super awesome. They actually do like an actual ghost tour where they give you equipment and you can like wander the grounds at night. And I want to go on it. It's on my list to do. I just haven't had a chance to do it yet. Okay, we're going to start with a little bit of the history with the lighthouse and kind of just its origin story. And then we'll get into the ghostly tales.
All right.
The origins of the St. Augustine Lighthouse, as I said, trace back to the late 1500s when Spanish settlers actually constructed wooden watchtowers to help ships kind of guide them through the treacherous waters. And the watchtower at the north end of the island eventually became St. Augustine Lighthouse. And the one at the south end of the island became Fort Matanzas National Monument, which I also believe is haunted. So there's a lot of things in Florida and specifically this area that we could do episodes on. So, but at the end of the French and Indian War, the British were in control of Florida, and it was actually divided into East and West Florida. So the capital of East Florida was St. Augustine, and at the time it was about a town of like 500 homes. And I also thought that was really weird that they divided it into like East and West Florida because Florida's really long. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like there would have been a better way north and south. whereas east, I don't know, that was weird to me. But so at this point, shipwrecks still continued to be a serious problem and, causing all kinds of setbacks. But despite this, the shipping and trade to and from East Florida increased, and the town traded with all the British colonies that were to the north. And St. Augustine actually became a military stronghold for the British but at this time, it was around that time where Great Britain and their relationship to the American colonies kind of began to shift. We all know what happened there. And on New Year's Eve in 1782, there were 16 plus shipwrecks that wrecked shipwrecks. There were 16 plus ships that wrecked during a nor'easter while attempting to enter the harbor. And these ships were a few of the hundred that were used by the British to evacuate Charlestown, South Carolina. At this point, the British population in St. Augustine increased to about 30,000 people. And they also had thousands of Native Americans that came and camped outside of the city gates seeking British protection. So at this point, the government was really struggling to feed and protect everybody and eventually closed all British interests south of New York, and Florida was ceded back to Spain. And St. Augustine once became a military outpost on the fringe of Spain colonies. It took a few more years, until 1821, when Spain formally ceded Florida to the United States. But Florida did not actually become a state until March 3rd of 1845. The first official lighthouse was built by the newly established U.S. government in 1824, and that replaced the old Spanish watchtower. So now we're going to jump up to the Civil War, when the Union Navy steamed into the harbor on gunboats and took over St. Augustine peacefully. There were still some Confederates that were living in St. Augustine, and they actually removed and hid the lens and the clockwork mechanisms of the lighthouse in order to block Union shipping. But eventually the whereabouts of the clockworks and lens were discovered, and the American government relit the beacon in 1867. So now we're going to jump to the current lighthouse and when that was built. So it was by the mid-19th century in 1874. It started to become really evident that the original lighthouse was in danger of collapsing into the ocean. So in 1871, they started the construction of the current lighthouse that stands today, and it was completed in 1874. This new structure was built a little bit more inland and kind of on some more stable foundation, so it wasn't, being damaged as much by the treacherous waters. And the lighthouse was fitted with the first order Fresnel lens, which at the time was state-of-the-art technology, and it allowed the light to be visible from nearly 24 miles away. So then we are going to jump into the 1970s, where there was this fire that just completely gutted the keeper's house that was on the lighthouse ground. Fortunately, no one was living in the keeper's house at the time, but it did threaten the historical site. But fortunately, there was this wonderful group called the Junior Service League that consisted of over 16 women that helped restore the property, and they raised over $1.2 million for restoration of the keeper's house. The only part of the keeper's house that wasn't damaged or wasn't fully gone from the fire was the basement.
Did you say 60 women?
16
16
women. Yeah.
That's the power of women.
That is the power of women. Only
We
16
get
had to
shit
do it.
done.
Didn't even
We
have to be
get
60.
shit done.
We get shit done. I have another badass buff bitch that comes in later in the story. But yeah, so they helped restore the keeper's house, and they added it to the National Register of Historic Places. And in 1994, a maritime museum opened on the lighthouse grounds as well. So on the grounds, you have the lighthouse, you have the keeper's house. There is another part that's like a museum. And then I think there's one other building, and then the guest shop and offices and things like that. So it's really beautiful grounds. I wish went at a time where it wasn't 1,000 degrees outside and I got to explore the grounds a little bit more. But we did the lighthouse. We walked up the lighthouse steps first. So then we were super eager to get into the keeper's house because it was air conditioned. So we didn't get to explore the grounds very much. But the museum received the entire property from the U.S. Coast Guard in 2002, and they earned a National Preservation Award. And the museum holds a collection of 19,000 objects and offers educational programs to over 216 visitors annually. Accredited by the American Alliance of Museums in 2017, the museum continues to preserve and share maritime history. And the current lighthouse tower, as it stands today, will be 150 years old in October. And it
Wow.
still remains a vital part of St. Augustine's navigation and historical heritage.
That's amazing.
Yes. So that's just
150.
a very condensed history of the lighthouse. Now we are going to get into some of the tragic deaths and hauntings for the
Ooh.
lighthouse. So,
I mean, ooh, to the hauntings, not the
not the
tragic
tragic
death.
deaths. Yeah,
Of course, you probably have the hauntings because of the tragic deaths, but
that's true. I have a whole list of things that happen that aren't like specific to any one thing. So we don't know if they were tragic, but the
mm,
first couple are. So, well, actually, this first one, it didn't even say how he died. I couldn't find that. So, one of the lighthouse first keepers was a guy named Peter, and he was known for his meticulous eye and his watchful manner of maintaining the lighthouse. He was really good at his job and he loved a good cigar. And the smell of cigars is often noticed in the lighthouse stairwell, even though smoking is prohibited on the property. So everyone kind of attributes the smell of cigars to him. But that was like the only main sighting I could really find that's specific to him. But like I said, I have some sightings also that are kind of random and go to whatever. So
right.
then there was Keeper Joseph Andrew, and his ghost is known as the Man in Blue. And many people believe that his figure is still wandering the lighthouse to this day. So he was the keeper from 1854 to 1859. He was actually the cousin of the first lighthouse keeper, Juan Andrew, who served from 1824 to 1845. Tragically, Joseph died when he fell while painting the exterior of the lighthouse.
Ooh.
Stories say that his wife, Maria, went to the top of the lighthouse to call out after he fell, "What shall I do?" And she reportedly said she heard her husband's voice on the wind tell her to tend to the light. So at this point, with
Wait. Her husband fell off the
while
lighthouse
painting,
while painting, and she ran up the lighthouse and asked, "What shall I do?"
yes,
Instead of down to the
yes,
bottom of the lighthouse?
that is what stories report.
Huh. That's interesting.
Yeah. I thought that was a little interesting as well. But again, stories report. So whether that actually happened, who knows?
True.
But anyway,
True.
as questionable as that decision was for Maria, Maria is the boss ass bitch I was talking about earlier.
Ah.
With overwhelming support from the St. Augustine community, Maria became the first female lighthouse keeper in Florida of Hispanic American descent. She set a precedent for women in the military and was actually paid equally to men in the same position.
Wow, that doesn't even happen now.
No, it doesn't. So, as I said, Maria getting the shit done. The U.S. Coast Guard recognizes Maria as the first Hispanic American woman to serve in the Coast Guard and the first to command a federal shore installation. Unfortunately, her tenure was cut short by the Civil War when the lighthouse was darkened to protect St. Augustine, but she moved away. She didn't die at the lighthouse, but her husband did. She was
Okay.
still amazing and should be celebrated. But now
Yes, she did.
to the spooky ghost stories from Joseph. So people have reported seeing and hearing Joseph at the top of the tower, I guess where his wife went to call down to him, even though he fell off of the tower. And he's often seen looking out from top of the tower. And then there was this quote, and it did not say who this quote was from, but I think someone who must have worked there. But they said, when he appears, referring to Joseph, he makes life a living hell for the workers. One lighthouse keeper refused to go back to work because the man in blue harassed him for the whole night, chasing him up and down the 219 stairs of the lighthouse.
Jeez.
Eventually,
How
what
many times can you be chased up those stairs?
I went up those stairs once and I was like, if there was a ghost chasing me, the ghost would just get me because I'd be done.
Right. Before my ankle injury, we went up one of these towers on one of the battlefields of Gettysburg. And I don't think that was anywhere near the same amount of steps as the St. Augustine Lighthouse. And when we got to the top of that thing, I was like, I just need to sit here. Does anybody have any oxygen?
Yes, that is how I felt going up these stairs because it's it's a lot. And there's even like landings. So like as you go up, there's like landing spots where you can like stop and kind of rest. But yeah, I don't know how people do it. But then he
Well,
also
you did
said
it.
I did do it, but I don't know if people do it like multiple times a day, I guess. But they also said that eventually the lighthouse duty had to be handed over to the Coast Guard because of Joseph's wrath. So basically, he was just scaring the workers way too much and nobody wanted to be the keeper anymore. Now we're going to get into what is the most, in at least my opinion, the most tragic accident and probably the thing that has the most hauntings kind of associated with it. But it was the Pity Girls. And this was in 1873. So this was when the current lighthouse was being constructed. And there was the construction superintendent, Hezekiah Pity, and he moved with his family from Cape Elizabeth, Maine, to help oversee the construction. He lived there with his wife, Mary, and their children, Mary, Eliza, Edward, and Carrie. The Pity kids, like any other kids, would use the construction site as their playground, and they invited the workers, children, to kind of join in on the fun. So in 1873, at this point, when the Pity Kids were there, only the foundation and 42 feet of the 165 tower were complete. So in order to get supplies from the supply ships to the lighthouse area where they were building, they used this railway cart that led from where the ships would dock to the building area where they needed to get the supplies. And the Pity children kind of used it as their own Victorian era roller coaster. So they would ride it down to the water and then they would push it back up to the site to ride again.
Sounds
At,
awesome.
it does. It sounds like a lot of fun. I would have done the same
Yeah.
thing. At the end of the rail, there was only a wooden board that kept the cart from tipping over into the water. So on July 10th, 1873, the Pity sisters, Mary, who was 15, Eliza, who was 13, and Carrie, who was only 4, along with an unknown African American girl who was 10, were riding the cart as they usually did. But for some reason, the wooden board that stopped the cart from entering the water wasn't in place. So the
Uh-oh.
cart slipped into the water and it trapped the girls underneath. Mr. Dan Sessions, who was a young African American worker working on the construction site, saw the entire thing and rushed over to pull the cart off, but only one of them was still alive, Carrie, the youngest, and the other 3 had drowned. So at this point, the construction site and the entire town of St. Augustine was shut down for the girls' funeral, and the Pity family returned to Maine to lay their daughters to rest in their hometown. Unfortunately, researchers haven't found the final resting place of the young African American girl. And obviously, as I said, this was back in 1873. So we all know how African Americans were treated at that time. And I guess it just wasn't important enough to report. So finding any historical evidence on her specifically has been really challenging. The museum is really trying to figure that out. And there's a piece that we'll get into in a minute that, hope gives us a little bit of hope. So we'll see. But
Hopefully.
it has been 145 years since that accident, and a lot of strange occurrences have been attributed to the spirits of the girl. In the 1950s, a lighthouse keeper had heard footsteps upstairs in the house. So they were in the keeper's house. And when he checked, no one was there. The head keeper at the time was James Pippin, and he served from 1953 to 1955. So a very, very short period of time compared to some of our previous keepers. And he was the last keeper to live at the light station. I wonder why. At first, he lived in the keeper's house, like all the previous keepers, but then he moved to the much smaller 1941 Coastal Lookout building, claiming, and this they had this in quotes, so I'm assuming he said this, that the big house was haunted and he would not stay there another night.
Oh,
So yeah, the girls, I guess, were just running around wanting to play, and he didn't want to hang out. He was like, no,
anyone play?
he didn't want to play. Don't
Run
worry.
around with them.
Don't worry. There's a good story where someone does play with the girls, and it's really great.
Oh,
So
that's awesome.
yes, we'll get into that. In 1955, the lighthouse lamp actually became fully automated, and the United States Coast Guard replaced the lighthouse keepers with a position called lamplighter. The local lamplighter had all the same duties of the light keeper, but didn't have to live on site because the light was fully automated.
Right.
So as a result, the keeper's house was rented because you have an empty house. What are you going to do? Rent it. So a local man who moved in, he crafted leather goods and he rented the property during the 1960s. He tells a story of waking up one night with a small girl standing by his bed. As he blinked his eyes to look at her, she disappeared.
I've had similar experiences.
I have too, specifically after 8 lemon drop martinis. That was when I woke up the next morning in your old house with something standing over my bed. But I take that with a grain of salt because I had 8 lemon drop martinis the night before.
Can you
So
describe to me what it was that you saw? Because I have stuff that the kids have seen in the area of the house that you were sleeping in.
it was just a shadow figure at the edge of my bed. That was all I could really see. And I like blinked and it was gone. But
It
that
is where
room was well lit because, it had that back door in it.
right.
So at that time, like it was lit enough. It wasn't like I was waking up when it was still dark. Like I woke up when it was already starting to get light and saw this shadow at the edge of my bed.
Those are the rooms that the shadow figure would kind of go back and forth between.
Yeah, it
Was the two rooms at the end of the hall.
was possible. I could have seen it, but I also could have made it up in my head because we know what 8 lemon drop martinis does to a person.
Do
Do we? We do. We
you
do.
really remember?
So it's possible that this local guy that was living in the house maybe had 8 lemon drop martinis the night before when he woke up and saw,
Possible. I don't know about probable, but
maybe not lemon drop martinis, but it could have had something else.
do you think he had boob money to pay for him?
He probably did not have boob money to pay for it.
Ah,
But that's what he claims. But he blinked and she wasn't there. That's what happened to me. But again, I don't know if I actually saw anything. Then in the 1970s, the keeper's house was empty for a while. And that was when it mysteriously burned down, which left only the basement and a few charred timbers of the actual remaining house. So at this point, this is when the house was being renovated, and the construction workers and the volunteers that were around experienced a lot of strange things. The basement was super active and had a lot of ghostly encounters. And this is kind of attributed to the fact that it was the only part of the home that didn't entirely burn down. So maybe all the
no.
spirits decided they wanted to go hang out in the only part that was the original part of the basement. And the basement is super like creepy because I've been down there. Because when we went into the keeper's house and explored and toured the whole thing, and you definitely feel like you're in like a basement that is super old. Like it's like stone walls and yeah, definitely creepy. But the girls, as mischievous spirits, liked to play hide and seek. And sometimes they do this with unsuspecting people. So one night in the dark lighthouse tower, there was one single staff member that was closing up for the night, and he heard a giggle at the top of the tower, thinking that, someone was up there and he was trying to close. So he needed to make sure that nobody was like hanging out. He climbed the 219 steps to the top to find nothing. No one was there. And as soon as he started to descend the stairs, he heard those same giggles coming from below him. Now, I will tell you, I've been in this lighthouse. There's no back way. Like, you're not going to the top of the lighthouse and then someone's sneaking down a back way to get back down, right? They're not getting past you. It's
Right.
not that big.
Well,
So,
if they want to jump off the top, and that didn't work out for the other guy, so
yeah,
it
yeah.
fell from the top.
Yeah, that actually, so I meant to look this up, but I ran out of time. So I don't want to give too much information because I don't want to say anything wrong. But there was actually a guy late last year, that jumped off of the top of the lighthouse. Like since I've moved to Florida, that happened. And He didn't die on site. He was taken to the hospital, but then after a couple of days passed away. But I meant to look up more information and
That's
then
so
ran out of
sad.
time. It is. It's very sad. But anyway, as the lone staff member went back down the stairs, he once again found that no one was there. Could it have been the wind? Or was he caught up in a game of hide and seek with the three little girls?
I do remember the Ghost Hunters episode that when they were kind of at the bottom of the lighthouse, they would see like a head like peek over and look down at them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They
that
also
was
had a lot of activity with the REM pods in a similar type fashion where they set the REM pods on the different levels of the stairs. 'Cause like I said, there were landings. And for anyone who doesn't know, a REM pod basically picks up any type of movement. So it's a little device that makes a bunch of noise if anything gets close to it. So if there's like vibrations, it'll pick that up and start making noises. And what the REM pod above them would go off. So then they would go up to that REM pod to look at it, and then the REM pod below them would go off. So it's very similar to this story and kind of that mischievous little spirit, like, playing around with them and getting them to run up and down the stairs.
right. I would like to say, since we did mention the gentleman who jumped off the top of the lighthouse within the last year, that if you are struggling with your mental health, if you are in the US, you can dial 988. And that is like a crisis line where you can find resources and get help. If you're outside of the US, please look up what your resources are because I don't have them in front of me. I just know the US because this is where I live. But
Yes,
please, please reach out for help because you are worth being here and we want you here.
absolutely. 100%. Thank you for that, Kelly. So then another evening, there was a female guest that was on the Dark of the Moon ghost tour. So that was the ghost tour I was telling you about earlier. They were standing on the first step of the metal lighthouse stairs. I guess she probably just was resting there while they were talking and she had her foot up on the step. When they went to start climbing the tower to go up the steps, she found that her shoelace was tied to the stairs.
Oh, wow.
So someone tied her shoelace to the stairs.
How would
What
you explain that? Anything other than, or how does she not feel it?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like, 'cause if a person was like trying, like if she was so focused on whatever the tour guide was saying and someone like a friend like was tying it, you feel like you would feel it. Cause that's why
Maybe
I was thinking,
we'll have to put it to the test when I come out next month. I'll see if I can sneak tie your shoe.
yeah, I don't wear tennis
Mm.
shoes, so that's not gonna
Well,
work.
that'll be a real problem then.
I wear flip flops. It's Florida in the summer. Do you really think I'm putting socks on my feet, Kelly?
I don't live in Florida, man. I mean, it's like 98 here this week.
Yeah,
So it's
it's
pretty
pretty.
damn hot.
Yeah, that's pretty hot.
I wear socks.
No,
So
I hate socks. I don't wear socks unless I absolutely have to.
I feel that way about bras.
Also fair. I also only wear a bra if I absolutely have to. During another tour, there was a guide that found a bunch of women. So let me just kind of explain the tour real quick because there's a couple tours that they do in the lighthouse. One specifically is the ghost tour, where it's just you kind of are with a guide and they walk you around and at night, but they tell you all the spooky things and ghost stories. And then there is another one that is more of an investigation where you actually are given, you know, material and items to go investigate, and you kind of get free range of the property to investigate. So this was one of these tours. And there was a bunch of young women in the basement of the keeper's home. One of them had rented an EMF meter. And for those who don't know, an EMF meter detects electromagnetic energy. So if you have it near any type of electrical equipment, it'll go off. But it also is known to detect spiritual activity because if you're not around electrical material and it goes off, it usually means there's a spirit or some type of activity there.
I think it's important to mention as well that if you are seeing things or feeling like you feel like a oppressive force or something, that unusually high EMF readings from the electricity in your home can cause those types of
Yes.
sensations and I believe also hallucinations, but I'm not positive on that part.
Yeah, I think that's why
So it's good to check.
initially EMF detectors were it was almost used kind of to debunk the paranormal in a
Right.
sense of like, oh, we're going to just see if you have this like high electromagnetic energy. But then they, I guess, over time found out that spirits can interact with it. And I've seen it like on Ghost Hunters and other shows where they'll like ask questions and then it'll like light up based on the answers.
Right.
So the one girl was holding the meter, suggested that they play a game of hide and seek because I'm sure she was told stories about how the little girls like to play hide and seek. So as she suggested that, the meter went crazy and she wasn't walking around. She was standing in one spot. She wasn't near anything and the meter just went crazy. So she then started to play hide and seek. She started walking around the basement with the EMF detector, looking for any type of high activity for the meter. And right under the spiral staircase that led to the main floor, the EMF meter started going off. So excitedly, the woman said, "I found you. Do you want to play again?" And then, just like before, the meter spiked. And once again, she searched the basement. And after a few minutes, she found more electromagnetic energy near the children's play table. At this point, there was another group of guests that walked into the basement. So the energy reportedly disappeared. But I thought that was kind of a cool story of
Yeah.
she was playing with the little girls.
Right. You don't have to be, in most cases, if you are in a situation where there is a ghost, you don't have to be afraid of it.
These little girls just wanted to play hide and seek. And
Right.
she played hide and seek with them. Usually they make someone run up and down the lighthouse steps to do that. And she
Right.
was a willing participant.
And thankfully, she didn't have to do all those steps.
Exactly. So the girls also sometimes show up as clear apparitions. So there were a few years back when a guest was walking the maritime hammock trails because on the property there's a lot of different trails that you can walk. And as she was walking, she saw a little girl in a Victorian outfit sitting on the bench reading a book. And I'm sure in her head, she probably just thought, oh, this is, a tour guide or somebody dressed up, an actor or something dressed up because a lot of the volunteers there do dress up, to give information and things like that. So not
Right.
unusual. So she went over to talk to the little girl and then another group came up behind her in the opposite direction and she turned around for a second. And when she turned back, the little girl had disappeared completely.
If you hear little movements, it's not a ghost. We don't have studios. We are in our homes, and there are other people in our homes. Well, in my
There's
home,
other people in your homes.
there's a lot of
Just the dog in
peoples.
my home.
There's a lot of peoples in my homes, but it's
Yeah.
okay.
Then there was a similar incident, and a woman on a ghost tour approached another woman to praise her daughter's behavior. And said, "Oh, your daughter was so well behaved on the ghost tour." And that the second woman was really confused because she didn't have a daughter.
Ah,
The other woman mentioned that there had been a little girl that was standing next to her most of the evening during the tour. And they checked
hmm.
with the tour guide, and there had been no children on the tour that night.
When my boys were little, when they would go, to other people's homes or birthday parties, and one of them in particular, when I would pick him up, and the parent would say, "Oh, he was so well behaved and so respectful." I didn't believe that either because I lived with him. But I am glad it did show me that the lessons that I was trying to teach them about appropriate behavior and like it was sinking in.
There you
They
go.
just didn't care at home because that's their safe space where they can
Do whatever.
just unravel.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. And then last thing about the little girls is that even though this was only the kids weren't the only tragic part of the home histories, they are some of the most active spirits. And a lot of time, the lighthouse employees and volunteers will get calls from psychics reaching out to give them information about the spirits. And recently, one of them had said that they felt that the young African American girl that passed away, that they didn't know her name might be Ellie or Eleanor, which is the name of my puppy. And by puppy, I mean almost 5-year-old dog, but she's still always a puppy.
So
The
called Birdie, my puppy, and he's 14. So
But yeah, exactly. They're always puppies. But the museum is looking into this and really hopes to find some type of historical evidence to help confirm this information. So now that they have a name, they can kind of go back and start looking at some of those records and see if there was anybody by that name that might have been a child of a worker on the property that had passed away. So that'll be really cool if they could figure that out.
yeah,
So that was the little girls. Like I said, very tragic, but it sounds like they're having a blast in the afterlife. Got a lot of people to entertain them. So hopefully they're, having a good time and living it up in the afterlife.
Sounds like they are.
It does. It does. So now we're going to get into just the various other experiences, and these could be some of the spirits that we've discussed before. They could be other spirits. There's a lot of other deaths that aren't necessarily as well documented that I couldn't find enough information to really give you, but I did just read a lot of things about other accidents during construction and things like that where there was just a lot more deaths on the property. I did read one article that said something about like 13 pirates or something were buried on lighthouse grounds, which I think is kind of cool.
Huh.
St.
Yeah.
Augustine used to be a big pirate town, so that is
Do you think it
very
was
plausible.
Captain Jack Sparrow?
I only hope that it was Captain Jack Sparrow because
Maybe his ghost could follow you home.
his ghost could follow me home. I will bring his ghost to my house. I don't have rum though, so I'd have to buy a bottle of rum for him.
It's okay. It's not that
Yeah.
expensive.
No, it's not. I can buy a cheap bottle of rum. I don't think he was drinking the good stuff. So anyway, some experiences that are reported in the lighthouse itself. Staff members say that they will lock the door at the top of the tower each night before they leave. And when they come in the morning, the door is open, despite being locked the night before. Sometimes they say in a storm, they can see a woman dressed in white and a small girl with her that are seen at the top of the tower. For some reason, only during
Lady
a
in White
storm.
again.
Lady in white. There's all those ladies in whites. There's also reports of a father and child seen on the lighthouse stairs. Didn't really say what they were doing, but just said that they were reported to be seen.
Okay.
In the keeper's house, which has a ton of activity, guests and staff have witnessed furniture just moving on its own,
Nice.
just moving around. The basement is a well-known spot for EVPs, which are electric voice phenomenons for anyone who doesn't know. And that's basically any type of recording device you have picks up a voice that was not there in present time. Now, I will say with EVPs, I have heard a lot of them, and people often claim that things are being said. And I do not hear it until someone says, I think they said this. And then all of a sudden I hear it. So
Yeah, it's real easy to. That's why, like, if I'm going to hear an EVP for the first time, I don't want to hear anybody's opinion on it. I
exactly.
want to listen to it about 25, 30 times.
Yeah. Before anyone
And-
tells me what it's supposed to say.
Right. And if I truly am like, I hear nothing in this, and they go, well, I think it's saying, I don't know, girl power. And then I listen to it and I hear girl power. I'm less inclined to think that that is what it says
Exactly.
because I listened to it 30 times and heard nothing.
And heard nothing. Right.
Some
So-
of them, however, are extremely clear.
Yes. I've heard some really freaky ones before where it is just so obvious what it is saying. And again, it is something that is recorded. So unless you specifically know the person, you never know that someone else wasn't there in the background whispering, get out into their microphone.
One of my favorite things is when you hear the EVP for the first time and you are like, you have the same reaction as the people like on the show you're watching have. Like, it's like, oh my God, it just said this.
Yeah.
One of those moments was on Project Fear. They had gone back to a location they were at previously. And the first time they were there, the ghost was, their spirits were really messing with one of the guys on the team, Tanner. And they had sent Tanner, I think, to the basement or something by himself because why not when the spirits are messing with only you?
Yeah, why not? Sounds like a
And
good
the
idea.
other three went upstairs and they were doing an EVP session. And they got an EVP that said, I remember Tanner. And it was so clear. I was like, that's some creepy shit right there.
Yeah, that's weird. That's weird. But anyway, in this instance, in the basement, one guest had used his phone to record because, again, it was reported for getting EVPs. But not long after he started his recording, his phone turned off. So he jokingly asked out loud, did you turn off my phone? Thinking, hey, and you would joke, did the spirits turn off my phone? Another guest who was recording at the time later discovered right after he asked that question, he heard, yes, in the microphone.
Wow.
So I thought that was kind of cool. I didn't hear the EVP. There wasn't a recording of it. So I can't tell you if it actually sounded like yes or if it was static and someone thought it said yes. But
Right. Because that kind of a hissy yes can easily be static.
Exactly. Eyewitnesses also have seen mysterious wet footprints in the basement to just disappear a moment later. People think that this might be the little girls because they drowned. So maybe
Has anybody touched it? Like, did it feel wet or does it
it didn't
just look
say.
like?
They just
Oh,
said that they saw the wet footprints and then they disappeared like a moment
okay.
later. Sometimes people also say they feel oppressed when they're in the basement, and they sometimes will see a man who just passes visitors without even giving them a glance. So that was a little weird. And they also report to hear moaning in the stairwell and see creepy shadow figures in the basement.
Whenever I hear people say something about moaning, I just think of like Scooby Doo. Like it seems like very like a very cartoonish thing
Yes.
that I guess it depends on how what the moaning was, because there are
Yeah.
definitely places of great suffering, like at Penhurst Asylum, where if you heard like moaning in pain, that makes sense
Right.
because of the atrocities that happened there. But I just when I hear the word moaning, I think in my head like,
Yes.
this makes me think of Scooby Doo.
Exactly. I agree. I agree. And then some other reports that are just kind of couldn't find a specific place that it was, they were seen or other places around the lighthouse. But the lighthouse staff has reported that chairs have been moved, sometimes even overturned, and that items in the gift shop were moved or missing, only to reappear later. So initially, when I read the items in the gift shop were moved or missing, I was like, someone shoplifted.
But that's paranormal. But
Yeah,
then they
but
came back
they
later.
came back. So
Yeah,
maybe the shoplifter got a conscience and felt bad and was like, I'm going to return this. Or maybe it was ghost.
maybe.
Maybe.
I can't imagine too many shoplifters were like, I probably shouldn't have done that. I'm going to take it back.
Where you could get it is where if it's like kids, where if like a kid grabs something and then the parent finds it and then the parent brings it back but doesn't want to be
Yeah, that
like,
could happen.
my kid stole this. And they just
But
kind
then
of,
they would tell them. I mean, I'm a parent and I would definitely, well, I don't know, not in today's world. Like when the boys were younger, I absolutely would have taken them and said, he took this, we're returning it just for the lesson that he has to look
yeah,
that person that they took something from in the eye. But in today's world, like people will straight up call cops on a 4-year-old.
right.
Of course, that did have Blaze did get the cops called on him when he was like 6 because he fell off his bike and his bike hit a truck when he fell off of it. So they called the police on him for damaging their truck, which it didn't even damage.
So yeah,
Yeah,
people are crazy.
they are
So
crazy.
you might have some parents that just bring the items back. Now, what I'd be interested to find out is where do the items reappear? Do they
Right.
were they like doing inventory and they were like, hey, this item's missing. And then all of a sudden it showed back up in that same spot like 2 days later? Or are they reappearing at random spots around the grounds? Because
Right.
that,
'Cause it
and
could easily be a kid taking it and then just
it
dropping it
could be, but it
somewhere.
could also, if it's reappearing in like maybe their back offices or the areas that the guests
Right.
aren't, that could be possible too. So I'd be interested to learn more about that. They've also reported that music boxes have turned on by themselves. That was plural. So I don't know how many music boxes are hanging out at the lighthouse grounds, but apparently at least two.
I have my mom, when Nick and I got married, she got us it's like a bride and groom and it's a music box that when you twist it, it plays, I don't know, the wedding march or whatever. I don't know what the hell that's called. And when we lived in our previous home, that would go off all the time and the kids hated it. They were so creeped out by it. And it was any kind of a music box just going off is just going to sound creepy.
Yeah,
It
absolutely.
happened all of the time in the other house. So we moved into this house. Hasn't happened once.
Yeah. That's because your last place was haunted.
One could say that.
One could say that. And the last report that I have is that guests have reported a drop in temperature or walking into cold spots. And at the same time, they see a tall shadow figure of a man.
Well, that
And
might
when
be a
this,
relief in Florida. Like,
it
come
might
on,
be, but
where's
come on,
the cold
shadow
spot?
figure, let's go. Come hang out with me as I'm walking up these lighthouse stairs. But when the shadow figure disappears, the temperature goes back to normal. So that is a very good point. Next time I'm there, I think I'm going to call on that shadow figure that changes the temperature to just come hang out with me
Right.
as I tour the grounds. That would be nice. But that is the St. Augustine Lighthouse. There was so much more that I even could have included and didn't, but
Yeah, it's
um,
difficult to take like all of the stories and put them into a
yeah,
reasonable length podcast,
exactly.
especially when
And
you're
even just,
getting into the history of
yes,
everything first, because that's important to kind of the stories that you're going to hear.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And there was so much history I left out too, because you just, this
Right. You can
podcast
only
would have
do so
been
much. You got to
three
get
hours
to the
long.
right. And you got to
Exactly.
get to the good stuff. You got to
Yeah,
get
we're a
to the
ghost podcast
not
with a
that
little bit of
history is not
history.
good stuff. I love history, but this is a
Yes,
paranormal podcast.
absolutely. So, thank everybody for joining us on this fascinating journey through the history and ghost stories of the St. Augustine Lighthouse. And remember, as you ascend the stairs of this historical beacon, keep this in mind:
If it's not your ghost,
it's not your problem.
until next time, stay spooky.
And stay skeptical.